Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. So, welcome to the interviews with Richard Windmann. My name is Richard Windmann, and our guest today on the show is Kathryn Robb, and she's with Child USA. Thank you for coming on the show. We certainly appreciate it.
Happy to be here.
Great, great. Some of our audience members might not know who you are. Can you give us a little bit of background on where you came from, who you are, and what you do?
Sure, happy to. So I'm presently the executive director of ChildUSAdvocacy, which is the sister organization for Child USA. We are a 501c4, so I'm allowed to do a little bit more heavy hitting, which is, by the way, my favorite thing to do when it comes to knocking some sense into lawmakers about child protection legislation. So Marcy Hamilton and I work very closely together. I've known Marcy for, I don't know, over 16 years. We fought in many states together. Testified together in all over the country, really. I am also a survivor of child sexual abuse. I was abused by a family member for about 8 years. And I think what a lot of folks don't know is, of course, all abuse is bad, regardless of where it's happening. But close to 40% of all child sexual abuse is actually happening in the home. And so it creates a lot of secrecy and shame and, protecting the family. And of course, we see it everywhere else, right? We see it in the church, with Boy Scouts of America, youth serving organizations, schools, camps, you name it, it's there. So I do bring to my work, not just the expertise of drafting legislation and advocating for legislation and testifying, and also my work as an attorney, but I bring the lens of a survivor. I understand why it takes survivors so long to come forward. It took me into my mid-40s to speak publicly about my abuse. And so I really understand that. And I can use that lens as a way of creating the most effective and sound public policy. So I'm committed to this work, Richard, and I'm not going to stop working and fighting for justice for all survivors and making these institutions and creeps accountable for the harm that they cause to children. As we know, it's a lifelong harm, and it's time for a change. And I'm going to keep at this for a long time. I said to Professor Hamilton just a couple of weeks ago, I don't see retirement anywhere in my future, because we really do have a lot of work to do. So, yeah.
So, you're an attorney by education, and I guess by trade. Do you practice law, full-time, part-time, or you just do the advocacy work?
This is a full-time job. It's actually more than a full-time job. I do a lot of writing. I write a lot of op-eds. I think, like I said, I'm in the middle of a book proposal, so pretty busy. So this is my full-time commitment, full-time work. This is where my heart is, as well as my mind. So
it's been my experience throughout the past decades is that the spotlight will come out, and that's a big deal, but then it'll fizzle out after a while. And then the John Jay report, and that fizzles out after a while. The Grand Poobah meeting in Dallas, the Dallas Charter, that got a lot of recognition, and it petered out after a while. I think since 2018, we've been on this incredible wave where there's this new world of awareness around childhood sex abuse. And it seems like we're on a roll, and the trajectory in my mind is straight up the chart. Is that your experience too? Is that what you're experiencing, or what you think is going on?
I do think the Me Too movement has been a big part of this, right? I think that people are more aware. So therefore, yes. And I think organizations like Child USA and their sister organization, the one that I run, ChildUSAdvocacy. I think we're really working on educating lawmakers across the country and educating, the citizens that vote for these lawmakers and put them in power. I think it is changing. I mean, right now we have 27 states and territories that have passed revival or window legislation to open up expired claims. And we have, I think 17 states and territories that have no civil statute of limitations for some or all child sexual abuse claims. So, this is clearly a movement. I think COVID did slow things down a bit, Richard, but it's a movement, and I don't think it's stopping anytime soon. We're also working on some federal legislation. At this point, I think everyone should be up in arms and taking on a zero tolerance policy and demanding that their legislators stop standing shoulder to shoulder with institutions that, in my opinion, are corrupt and mob-like. And we're really pushing legislators to do the right thing, and we're educating them, and hopefully we can make that shift, because you know what? It's a really, really crappy look to be standing on the side of predators and institutions. I mean, you just look really shitty, and it's not good for your candidacy. It's not a good optic if you're seeking reelection and seeking fundraising as well. And we're going to keep making citizens aware of this as they walk into the ballot.
So you talked about you're working on some federal stuff. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. Primarily right now, looking to either eliminate or extend the statute of limitations for some federal statutory civil wrongs. I won't go into all the numbers. So to either eliminate those or extend those, as we're pushing like we're pushing anywhere else, and that's section 2255 for anyone who wants to look it up. We're also working on, clearly the bankruptcy code chapter 11 needs reform. There is absolutely no way Congress ever intended, Richard, to have the bankruptcy system and the federal bankruptcy law to be a clearinghouse for sexual predators and their claims. So that nonsense just has to change. So we're working on that as well. And of course, Title IX, because a lot of these claims can be brought under if they happen in a public school or public university, as we've seen, at Ohio State and many other universities as well, to really sort of have more fairness and justice and uniformity. Because what happens with Title IX is, under the statute, they revert to the home state statute of limitations. So therefore, that federal legislation is not at all applied in a way that is fair or reasonable or uniform. So we're really looking to make those changes, educate lawmakers, also on, banning NDAs for child sexual abuse.
My God, yes,
Right. Like anything that keeps a damn secret about child sexual abuse, we're done. Like, this is insanity, because nothing ever good comes from a secret, especially a secret about child sexual abuse. So we're working with some great and really powerful legislators, and we're just going to keep at it.
Yeah, that's kind of sort of why I went public. It was because of the NDA. So, I was molested at Jesuit High School, and I signed an NDA. They made it very, very clear that if I didn't sign it, there would be no settlement. And that was after the Dallas Charter, which they were not supposed to do. And I really wrangled with it. It sent me to a really dark place after I signed it, because I realized that while they were publicly taunting victims, saying that, who is this John Doe? Who is this Jane Doe? And then in the same breath, they're secretly settling with victims and requiring their silence. And they did that with me. And I got mad and I felt guilty, because I felt like I was part and parcel of the cover-up now. And I decided I thought about it for a little while, and I figured that, well, I'm going to tell everybody. And you know what? If they sue me, fine. I don't care. I'll be a poster boy for that story too. But the I don't think that the NDA is really enforceable when you think about it, because it's the cover up the commission of a crime.
Mhm, mhm.
So
Yeah, and I think that they also take advantage of how challenging it is to be a survivor. I mean, Richard, I'm 62 years old, and I still am dealing with different layers of how the abuse is played out in my life and how painful it is, and with the help of a great therapist and working really hard to see that stuff. And I think when it seems to me, I don't mean to get into sort of, the validity of contracts here, but it seems to me that very often those survivors signing these NDAs are really on the urge of, on the edge, excuse me, of having capacity to really appreciate what they're doing. I find it highly offensive. It's just another way to keep a secret. And I think it's just another re-victimization of survivors. And it's so offensive to me to re-silence victims after it took so much courage, courage to come forward. It's disgusting to me, and I think there could be some legal challenges, although it would be quite an uphill battle.
yeah. So let's talk about Louisiana. I got told about the SOL bill, and I'll tell you that I was initially skeptical because I'm from Louisiana, and
Mhm.
all the legislators, just about all of them, are Catholic. And so I was very skeptical. I'm like, this is never, ever, ever going to pass. There's just no way. And but I went there anyway, and I testified before the representative committee, and you were there as well.
Yep.
And and what we did is we got survivors to come in and testify. Uh, but you were instrumental in actually penning the new the new bill.
Mhm.
So can you tell me you're a major actor there. Can you
Mhm.
tell me about the process and what you had to go through to get that done?
Sure. I met with Representative Jason Hughes. Let's see, I don't know, maybe it was, I can't remember what it was exactly. It was probably
About a year and a half.
September, October. Yeah, no, I'm just thinking about the month. And I
Mm.
was in a meeting with some other folks as well in that Zoom meeting, of course. And, Jason, Representative Hughes, asked me if I would write the legislation after we went through the points that we wanted. And, it's funny, I just, that particular day, I happened to have 2 hours, and I thought, shit, I'm just going to write the damn thing now,
Right.
and I did. And, there are a couple of small edits that we made, and, we worked with some really great people, sort of behind the scenes, had tons of meetings at all different hours of the day on the weekend. And, and essentially that was the piece of legislation that passed. And, I think, Representative Hughes did a great job. I thought the way he spoke to the chamber was beautiful and amazing, and I was in relatively close contact with him. And it took some convincing, but I think you know honestly, I was a little surprised myself, but in some states we can get it done pretty quickly. In other states like New York, it takes 13, 14 years of
Mm.
hauling ourselves up to the state house and trying to convince people. And often it's just a matter of shift of power, and other times it's just like educating lawmakers. And Richard, I don't really fault them for not knowing. Some of them just may not totally understand. I'm still educating lawmakers on how the statute of limitations and the criminal system really doesn't work, and it doesn't. It basically takes the ball of justice to midfield. It doesn't get it to the end zone. And it's really the civil statutes that will get us there. And first and foremost, these types of pieces of legislation will make the children of Louisiana safer. And that was the most important thing. Of course, having justice for survivors, but they go hand in hand. You can't really separate them. And when you educate lawmakers to understand that, and to really think outside outside of what they're sort of a knee-jerk reaction. I'm a lawyer. I'm an American citizen. I believe in our Constitution. I believe in due process. I think statute of limitations has a place in our society, but not when we're talking about sexual assault, rape, and sodomy of children. Sorry, not for those things.
Absolutely. It seems almost common sense.
You would think so, right?
Yeah. So I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you want to talk about the politics behind getting something like that passed, or do you want to be a diplomat?
I have to a little bit be a diplomat, but I have to say, it's a lot of people say, Kathryn, you did so much to pass this legislation, but I felt like there was a small army behind me, and but I do also think, I don't know if you felt this, Richard, just testifying at that one hearing, I think perhaps it was the last hearing, that I felt like lawmakers, either they were waking up, really paying attention, or someone told them to pay attention. I don't give a damn why they were paying attention, but I think there was, some acknowledgement of seeing things a little bit differently, or, again, I don't know if it's just what all the witnesses were testifying to, or written testimony, or I'm pretty sure it wasn't some beautiful, eloquent thing I said. So whatever the powers may be, yeah, I'm all for it. And a lot of it, quite frankly, I didn't quite understand. I kept pushing with the right people. And that's really what you try to do when you're passing legislation. You try to make meaningful connections with people that have their heart in the right place and can move to pass really good legislation for kids and for justice.
So after it's passed, the governor signs it into law. Archbishop Gregory Amen, yeah, I laugh a lot too.
Yeah. All in the name of Jesus.
He comes out in the press and he releases a statement saying that he was in support of the bill. Part of their rhetoric is that, this happens in schools too. Yeah, but the problem with that is when it happens in a school, they get taken out the classroom and the police get called and they get arrested. Not the Catholic Church. They don't call the police and they cover it up. So I reject that argument, but in it he said that
it's a terrible, weak argument.
Yes.
Yep.
And so he said in his statement that he supported the bill 100%. And then after that, the Louisiana Council of Bishops, for which Archbishop Amen is the chair, is now opposing the law and they're filing appeals. And now it's gotten all the way to the writ of application for the Louisiana Supreme Court. What do you think about that duplicity, or what do you think about them challenging the law after they accepted it? And at first, I think you were there for that as well. In the legislative chamber, they opposed it initially, and then afterwards they supported it, and now they don't support it again. What do you think about that?
Well, clearly duplicitous. I don't trust them at all, because you can't believe anything that they say, and they're focused on their power. They're focused on their image, and when it looks good to say, "Oh, I support this legislation. This is really good legislation," and then when it passes, then they let their dogs loose, right? So it's in short, it's just BS. It's all optics, and they don't support this legislation. We saw the same thing in New York, right? We saw the archdiocese there fight and fight and fight, like for years, fight our legislation, and then it passes, and suddenly they support it. I don't know how else to say this, but to be honest to your listeners, it's BS. And it's all about, again, it's all about optics, right? It's all about, they want to look good because it's, let's think about it. It's really bad. It's a bad look when you are standing with perpetrators and then institutions that cover them up as well. I mean, they're co-conspirators in a cover-up of child rape, no doubt about it, right? That's what they're doing. And quite frankly, some lawmakers are also co-conspirators in a cover-up of child rape. That's just the way I see it in very clear terms. So, it didn't really surprise me, Richard, because I've seen it in other states. And, it's really too bad. I just want to share with your listeners, I went to Catholic school for 12 years. I sometimes refer to it as Our Lady of Psychological Warfare. but I had a really good experience. We had these great nuns. They were unbelievable teachers. And I don't know all of what was going on. And, I was a kid, but I think, I believe in the teachings of Christ. I think they're beautiful teachings, but this institution is like the mob, right? They're so corrupt and they will cover up this heinous, to me, it's the worst crime that you can think of. It's worse than murder, in my opinion. Yeah. And for them to be holy and mighty and, and talk about, the teachings of Christ, it's just BS. And it's all about their image and their power and their money. And it's a sad state of affairs. I was actually just at a wedding yesterday and in a Catholic church. And I didn't get struck by lightning. That was surprising. But, I just thought to myself, it's just such a sad commentary because this is as we know, an enormous institution with a ton of power and billions of dollars. And for them to, do anything, just anything, wake up any morning and pray in the name of Jesus and do what they do to kids and cover this up and fight this really important legislation. It's so the opposite of Christ's teaching. I just don't see it. And it quite frankly, as someone who believes in the teachings of Christ before the Catholic Church screwed it all up, I find it offensive.
Wow. Okay. So let's get back to statistics because it fascinates me. No, it doesn't. I hated it in school, but the recent numbers are how many girls and boys are molested?
Right now, the best research has 1 in 5 girls and 1 in 13 boys. Hard to get those numbers. Some numbers are about 1 in 10 boys and 1 in 4 girls. But so either way.
What are our sources on this?
So we have, lots of different research. You can tell your listeners, they can go to ChildUSA and there's lots of data there that they can look at some of the statistics. RAIN also does a great job with their statistics, as does Darkness to Light is also another great resource to look at the most recent research on this. But, think about it, Richard, if we're talking, even if the number is something like 1 in 5 girls, 1 in 13 boys. Let's just think about that for a minute. So that averages out to about 13.5% of all children are going to be sexually assaulted before their 18th birthday. If this was some new, rare disease, Congress would have had hearings already, right? We would have passed federal legislation, talk about an epidemic.
Well, federal legislation, not just civil, but what about criminal? I mean, so for a victim and survivor, or at least being an advocate, I help victims and survivors all over the nation and all over the world. And it seems like we get for the criminal statutes, we get mired down in state law, and all the laws are different. Statute of limitations are different for that as well. What do you think about one federal law for child sex abuse, criminal?
We're working on some legislation that would incentivize states, meaning they'd get more funding at a certain, a few different resources. But to incentivize them, because it's really state by state. It really is. But if we can incentivize states from a federal piece of legislation whereby they would be getting, excuse me, more money for funding, that might be the way to do it. I mean,
well, states lobby, but they don't vote. So I don't know. It's frustrating.
Yeah. Well, I do think that we can do it. I mean, if we have, 27 states right now that have passed revival legislation, 17 states, excuse me, that have no civil statute of limitations. I mean, there's presently, it very much feels like a trend to do complete elimination of the statute and a wide open window, permanent window, never closes, right? Forward, backwards, we don't care. Zero tolerance policy. You touch a kid, end of story, right? You're not going to get this benefit of this basically in courthouse rule, procedural rule about when to bring a claim. You're just not going to get that benefit, because statute of limitations, we all know who it protects. It protects the defendants. And in the cases we're talking about, Richard, the defendants are, people who are raping and molesting children. I don't think they should get that benefit.
No, they shouldn't. No, of course not.
Right. Yeah.
So let's talk about the other laws and stuff and strategy. We're a organization that supports victims and survivors, like a lot of organizations do. And
good for you.
Thank you. We try to be a think tank, though, so we don't want to put all of our eggs in one basket. So our number one primary purpose is supporting victims and survivors. So we have support meetings all the time. We're really in the trenches with them. But as you know, as a 501c3, we're kind of limited on lobbying. We can do some, but they won't tell you how much. It's very vague and ambiguous, right? But we try to expose all of that stuff, and we try to help out in legislation wherever we can without getting, pulled down by the IRS. What we decided to do, because we were having, the problem is also, when you have a statute of limitations eliminated, then you have to get law enforcement on board to actually enforce it. Right. And that's been really frustrating, especially in Louisiana. I'll go ahead and say it. It's my hometown. New Orleans is my hometown, and it's corrupt. It's corrupt. And so you have civic leaders and businessmen, even a federal judge that helped the church cover this up. And so how do you skin that cat? When the police want to investigate, none of that. What do you do? So we picked up the strategy of we were going to surround them with feds. And so I went down to the FBI field office in Fort Worth, and I filed a complaint with the FBI. I gave them all the information that I had. I've been collecting over the years. The FBI is doing an investigation now. Also, we filed a complaint, an official complaint. There's actually a form for it. You can challenge a nonprofit status. And the Archdiocese stole $46 million in FEMA money to rebuild a cafeteria. Yeah, I know. And they got caught, and it was hush hush, and they settled it with the federal government for $1 million. That's a crime enterprise. I mean, that's a business. I mean,
it's a criminal enterprise.
Yeah. If I could steal $46 million and only pay a $1 million fine, that's a business.
Wouldn't everyone do that?
Right. And so we filed a complaint with the IRS as well. Now there's two investigations going on, the FBI and the IRS. I wanted to get your initial thoughts on whether you think that strategy will be effective, or just whatever your thoughts are.
Yeah. Well, I think that the more policing, and I'm putting up quotes for your listeners, policing that can be done from different organizations and agencies across the country, the more we can just keep beating at this, and just getting at it. And, the good news is there are some really good people, whether it's in law enforcement, or if it's at the judiciary level, the FBI, whatever it may be. there are good people. Those are the people that we need to reach, so we can expose the bad folks and the folks that really don't give a damn, and will keep covering up and allowing other institutions to get away with horrific acts and all of their criminal enterprise excuse me, acts. I do believe that, and I think just really working with them, and I think that the thing to answer your original question, Richard, is the power of the press, I think, is the most important tool we have. And I think, because what do? With the power of the press, if we can get some really good people, if it wasn't for the New York Daily News in New York, I don't think we would have gotten what we got in New York. But the power of the press is so important. Not only does it educate, our citizens, it shames the people that are engaged in, pretty unethical behavior and criminal behavior. It exposes that. It also, may affect their reelection or their funding or anything like that. Make people think twice about who they're giving money to. But I think it's really important that survivors and organizations like yours, Richard, that expose these people and just keep at it and keep talking about it, and have podcasts like you're doing, and organization as you are doing, and just come at these bad actors and institutions relentlessly. I mean, we're talking about kids, and we're talking about sexual predators and institutions that cover them up. And I think we all have a duty, a moral obligation to stand up for kids and for justice. And, I think we all need to educate, whether it's doing podcasts, writing op-eds, working with the press, speaking at press conferences, talking to folks that are producing documentaries, whatever it may be. We need to get out there and really do that.
Yeah, Kathryn, in our organization, like I said, our primary purpose is supporting victims and survivors, but a second initiative, which we think is very effective, is the press, raising awareness. Whenever somebody asks us to do an interview or just be anywhere to talk to anyone about it, we're right there. We never say no to that.
That's great.
No. Yeah.
That's great.
So tell me, what's been and we're at the bottom of the hour. I'm asking the folks on Facebook if they have any questions. Let's break for just 1 second. And we have a commercial from your organization to tell us a little bit about what they do, and to talk about the gala event in November. Okay. So I guess we'll just break for about 10 seconds, 15 seconds.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for questions from Facebook. Where am I? Yeah. Come on, questions, please. We have 2 people watching. We've been up as high as 17, but we currently have 2 people watching. Okay. So we're back. Thank you for being with us again, Kathryn. It's a pleasure to have you, and I know you're coming off of a sickness, and I know it's a lot for you to do this today, and I appreciate it. In terms of SOL legislation, what has been the easiest state and the hardest state for you to work in?
Oh boy. Right now, Pennsylvania is pretty tough. I think any state where you have a lawmaker that is in a great position of power, that has direct links to either the Catholic Church or some other big institution, even, private schools that have been covering up or trying to hush the abuses that have happened in their institution. When you have those connections with powerful lawmakers, it makes it really challenging because, for example, in Pennsylvania, Kim Ward has a lot of power, and she can either bring a bill to the floor or not. And she's essentially keeping her finger on that bill and it's not moving, and putting it in her drawer in her office and just not letting it move. So those are really,
right?
really hard.
Pennsylvania.
What's that?
It's in Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania. Yep. Pennsylvania. Kim Ward is really a puppet for the Catholic Church. They support her, and we're going to get it done. That's for sure. I mean, if Pennsylvania can't get anything done after the Philadelphia grand jury report, I mean, if that's not eye-opening, I don't know what is. And the good news is we have Josh Shapiro behind all of our efforts, supporting all of the survivors there, and really pushing for common legislation and statute of limitation reform. So that's good news. And we have a lot of good lawmakers there, but it's those states that have, again, someone in a position of power. We had the same thing with John Flanagan in the New York Senate, held the bill year after year after year, wouldn't even allow it to be heard in committee, and and had a very direct link to the Catholic Church there, and Cardinal. So it made it really challenging, and we just keep going after them. We're going to expose them. Really, between ChildUSA and ChildUSAdvocacy, there's nothing we won't do. We have put up billboards. We have protested outside of leadership homes in the morning. We have posted signs. I mean, we just won't stop. So, but yeah, so Pennsylvania is tough. Some states, we need a constitutional amendment just based on their constitution. One of those would be Florida. And there are a few others, but that's certainly doable when folks understand that amending this is usually around vested rights. When we amend the Constitution for this type of thing, that's better for, the citizens of that particular state. So, there are some tough ones. And, sadly, it's often in the red states or where that legislative body has Republican control, but not always. It is, this is a nonpartisan issue. So we make some really good connections with great Republican leaders. It's just about really educating people and getting people to not be so influenced by powerful institutions like, schools, the Catholic Church, Boy Scouts of America, whatever it may be.
So, Kathryn, I met Josh. I met Josh at a legal conference in New Orleans. Stand-up guy, Shapiro. Stand-up guy,
Yeah,
really good guy.
Yeah, great leader, just great leader.
I heard a rumor that he's going to run for governor. Do you think that's what it's going to take to get it passed in Pennsylvania? Not that he votes, but he signed.
Well, that's what he's doing right now.
Yeah, so it's not a secret anymore.
Oh no, he's fully campaigning.
Fully campaigning.
He's fully campaigning. Yep.
Okay. Yep. Yeah, I'm in Texas now, so I'm kind of out of touch with what's going on there.
Yeah.
So the easiest state was which one?
Well, Louisiana wasn't that bad. We had that bill introduced and, got it done by the end of session. That's relatively unusual. Vermont was relatively fast. I mean, states like California and Hawaii, and Delaware, they keep passing second and third windows, so some states really get it, and they get that, the courthouses aren't going to be flooded and the sun's going to come up the next day. And, not all hell loose is going to break loose when we start protecting kids and giving justice to survivors. So,
okay.
There have been a few states that have been relatively easy, and some states are hard just by the nature that we haven't passed legislation there yet, right?
Right. Okay, so we have some questions. You want to take a couple of questions from our
Sure. Sure thing.
So let's see. So Aaron Abear from Mandeville, Louisiana. I can say his name because he's public about his abuse. He was abuse survivor by Catholic Deacon George. I'm sorry. By Lawrence Hecker, who's a Monsignor. And so the background on that is that in his deposition, he was the one that admitted to the Mann Act, multiple violations.
Right.
So we're talking about Lawrence
taking kids over state lines.
Yep. And so this is Aaron's question. Aaron is the survivor. He wants to know, and I'll let go of this. You know, a lot of victims and survivors up to this date have done a lot of heavy lifting to get this stuff done. He
Mhm.
wants to know, what more can we do to get traction?
It's a really good question. And I would say to be extremely vocal, to run for office, you know, speak to the press, show up as, you know, much as you can. If you know a lawmaker that you think can pass another piece of legislation to make Louisiana even better, I mean, like your gold standard is Vermont, right? And let's just completely eliminate the statute of limitations and have a permanent wide open window that never closes. Zero tolerance state. We have some others as well. Let's do that. And so we can always make this better for both kids and survivors. Work with lawmakers, email lawmakers, call lawmakers, speak to the press, write letters, write op-eds. I mean, just be a force. So I feel like there's always something that we can do. And I think as survivors working together, supporting each other, understanding that sometimes, I work with a lot of groups of survivors, all over the country. And, sometimes someone in the group is just not in that month or week or day, not able to do something for whatever reason. We support them, right? And we have someone else step up. So we have what we call them united fronts. We have groups that we call united fronts in each jurisdiction, and we support each other. We have meetings, and we just work together and really push for better legislation. If someone has an idea in Louisiana about another piece of legislation that should be passed, I mean, I have a few ideas already, but, to reach out to us at ChildUSAdvocacy, to reach out to ChildUSA, if you already have connections with lawmakers that would sponsor a piece of legislation, ideally on both sides of the aisle, make those connections, reach out to us, support each other, and we're there to do whatever we can to really make this movement happen for everyone and be the greatest force that we can be. And I truly believe that survivors have so much power here, and it is their bravery, it is their commitment and tenacity that makes these changes possible.
I think that's an important message, Kathryn. So what we're saying is that victims and survivors who are able to find a legislator that's willing to participate and to sponsor a bill, we can engage that conversation with them, and then we can engage you as well as a support.
Yes.
Because you have more lawyers than anybody I know. I only have one lawyer.
Right.
I have like 50 years.
Right. Yeah. So, that's what happens a lot. A group will come to us, or one individual person said, I'm working with this lawmaker. A lawmaker will reach out to us, say, can you help us with this legislation? We'd like to work on this legislation. What's worked in other states? What hasn't worked in other states? This is, sort of the landscape that we have right now on this particular issue in this jurisdiction. And we try to find the best path forward. And if, obviously this means working with lawmakers, and hopefully lawmakers again on both sides of the aisle, and lawmakers in leadership positions.
We have a question from Joseph Scambra. I'm Italian. I don't know why I can't pronounce that. He wants to know, do you have any opinion on the McElroy in San Diego with evidence of Bishop covering up abuse?
Well, I don't know that case specifically. I know of it, but I don't know it well enough to comment too much other than this. Cover-ups hurt children. Cover-ups deny fundamental notions of justice. Cover-ups are bad for citizens, are bad for the common good. So any cover-up is bad for kids.
And just in general, it's not a good thing. I mean, it's not acting with honesty and integrity, especially when you talk about the church. I mean, these are people that are supposed to lead us to heaven. So we expect and understand integrity from them, right? Because I don't know
Yeah.
about you, but in my Catholic formation, say I'm in 5th grade and I lie, I go to hell for the rest of my life, right?
Right,
But
right,
they're
right,
the ones that are raping our children. I have a hard time reconciling that.
right. Well, look at Bishop Amen, right? They say one thing one time, I support this piece of legislation behind the scenes or kind of openly, fight against it, right? So which one is it? Is it A? Is it B? Right? He'd be a perfect person to cross-examine with a prior inconsistent statement, right? He's like, which one is it, right?
So I'll tell you the story behind that. So, I went public in New Orleans, and that caused a lot of people to come. Actually, my face and my name and everything, and over 50
good
survivors,
for you.
over 50 survivors came forward. And so
Wow.
they started filing these cases in civil court at the state level. And the attorneys were working for a couple of years. All of this valuable work product, depositions, and all of that stuff. And they were trying to depose Archbishop Amen, and it was always like, "Oh, I'm sick today. I got COVID. It's Mardi Gras. It's the weather's bad." It just went on and on and on. And the judge finally
delay,
ordered him to depose. And when he did that, that's when he filed bankruptcy. And so he's not going to testify. And in the act of filing the bankruptcy, all of those 50 plus cases were moved from civil state court to federal bankruptcy court. And so all of that work product these attorneys have been doing for years is just down the drain. They're going to settle for pennies on a dollar.
On the dollar, yep.
And the Archbishop doesn't need to testify. I would love to get the Archbishop in a deposition or on a stand. But I viewed the whole maneuver as a litigation tactic.
Oh, absolutely. And, you can only cover up for so long. I mean, they're going to be exposed. It's a matter of time. But anytime you're covering up and delaying, it means you have something to hide. It means you are guilty, right? It means that you've done wrong, right? It means you look really bad and dirty and you've harmed children. So this is why there's delay. This is why there's cover up. This is why there's filings, because you can't get that discovery, right? So it's very clear when people cover up, it means they're hiding something. I mean, you don't have to be a genius or, a legal scholar to understand this, right? The citizens are intelligent. They can see through this.
Yeah, and it's really frustrating. Like the older, more senior, fervent Catholics, they're like, "This never happened." I'm like, "So let me get this straight. You don't think that child sex abuse happens in the church, and you also think that the moon mission was fake and that wrestling's real? Seriously? Come on."
Right. And Elvis is still alive.
Yeah, Elvis is still alive. He was in Santa Monica the other day.
Yeah. He's not going to church.
No. So what's the difference between the two organizations? So ChildUSA and ChildUSAdvocacy, I think it's.
Yeah. So ChildUSA is a national think tank, right? So they do a lot of social science research. They do tons of legal research. As everyone knows, it's run by the founder, Professor Marcy Hamilton, who's a dear, dear friend of mine, but also the leading legal scholar on these issues. And just brilliant, in my opinion, just a brilliant woman who's doing great, great work.
And you have attorneys than Jesus.
There's a lot of attorneys, and they do great work. It's a great legal team, and they do just great work, whether it's on the federal level, state level, and they support my work. So we're a 501c4, so I can testify. I can just kind of put my gloves on. I can hit a little harder. I can go after lawmakers. I just have a little bit more freedom. Of course, it's impossible for me to raise money, but I can really go after lawmakers. Look, it's what I like to do. I like, I have a big mouth. I like to call people out when they're doing wrong, and covering up and, hedging and and hiding stuff. I naturally like to do that. So with my legal background as a survivor, I'm sort of the speaker, the voice, along with Marcy, but my testimony can be a little bit different. When I write my op-eds, I just have more ability because of the 501c4 status. lots of organizations do this. So they're really the national think tank. They help me with some of my testimony. I, of course, do my own oral testimony. So we work hand in hand. We have to be separate in terms of all our financials, because of the tax code,
Oh.
and our statuses. So yeah, we're I like to say that we are a 1-2 punch, Richard.
Yeah. So the it's a partnership that's strategic.
Extremely strategic. Yes.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yes.
You got any questions? Come on, guys. Well,
it is a Sunday, so maybe people are relaxing on the weekend.
I published a story today and it got over 8,000 hits on a Sunday. I'm like, wow.
Awesome.
Yeah. So we don't have any questions, just what, so, we have about 10 minutes left. What, I guess as leaders in this movement, we're all responsible for messages of hope. So, what's your vision? What's your vision for this movement? And what do you think is going to happen? I can tell you, like, from a medical scientist perspective, we'll always have pedophiles. Not going to happen. They're never going to go away, right? They have the highest rate of recidivism than any other crime category in the world. We know that they never have just one victim. We know all of these things about pedophiles, and they're not going anywhere. So where's the hope? What's the message? Where do you think this movement is going to?
I think the hope is in the spirit of truth. I think the hope is in listening to children and listening to survivors. I believe, it sounds cheesy, Richard, but I believe in justice. I believe in truth. And obviously I believe in protecting children, and I think that of course there's always going to be pedophiles, but the other thing I would just like to say that it's not just pedophilia that's part of this problem. And it's also the patriarchy. It's that we live in a system, a social system where generally speaking, I have 3 beautiful sons. I don't hate men or anything. I love my children. I love my ex-husband, and it's not about, because you get a lot of this when you say that, oh, it's a man, it's man hating. It's not that at all.
Okay.
It's not boys' fault. It's not men's fault. It's the structure in which we live. And sadly, that structure allows men to believe that they can have power over kids and girls. And so I call it the 2 Ps. It's clearly pedophilia. And you're right. We can't really fix that, right? But it's also this power of patriarchy of where, those in power that generally are men, especially in powerful institutions, including Richard, the family, right? They just have more power. So, and whether they're abusing boys or girls, it affects both little boys and little girls. So I think just looking at the problem with open eyes and trying to see more than the fish in the fishbowl can see, outside the water that they swim in, right? To really open our eyes to this societal ill. And I think we can do that. And I think that we can educate lawmakers, and we can educate professionals. We can educate teachers and parents. How do we spot child sexual abuse? How do we train? How do we, what are our best practices and policies and procedures in our institutions? Educating parents and teachers and coaches and all those administrators that run these institutions. I think that the power of truth and education, I look to that as a beacon of hope. And I truly believe it.
Thank you for that. Yeah, well, another question. You want to take another question?
Sure. Sure.
I think we already covered this to an extent, but it
Mhm.
comes from Jim Scanlon. He said, "Do we have Supreme? Stop moving, it's scrolling. Do you have Supreme Court opinion on the SL look back, which seems to be the hardest thing to pass, certainly in Rhode Island, and how are
Yeah.
some states passing it successfully while others can't?"
Well, as Jim will know, that it is very much based on the particular constitution of that particular jurisdiction.
Mhm.
And I think, you know, this is where ChildUSA and their wonderful legal department supports any sort of appeal on decisions of like what we're seeing right in Louisiana and other places. We've seen it in Rhode Island as well, of writing amicus briefs and really pushing these states to change. If in terms of overall Supreme Court decisions, I mean, you know, we don't have anyone that we're hanging our hat on particularly right now. And of course, everyone can agree that the United States Supreme Court is after this June session is it's flipped on its head. Who knows what's coming next? But you know, I think for those states, and there are quite a few, where we will have to have an amendment to the state constitution, there are certainly paths to get that done. Granted, it is not easy, but it is certainly something that is doable.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you so much for that. Another question from Tatiana Greenlinger. And I'll just read it verbatim for what she said. I also believe that pedophilia is not only a problem with clergy sex abuse. I was abused by a priest as a vulnerable adult. And does Kathryn agree that the predators clergy target vulnerable parishioners and that they are opportunists?
100%. I think pedophilia, and pedophiles and anyone that is sexually assaulting children or vulnerable adults is taking advantage of their powerful position and the weakness in either the vulnerable adult or the child. You know, it's criminal. It's you know, exercising power over those that are weaker than you than them, right? I mean, just think about, I mean, I don't know. Again, I went to Catholic school for 12 years, and this is not what Jesus taught about, like caring for children, right?
Oh my God, no.
And you're right, right? It's just contrary to that.
If Jesus was here, he would not recognize his bride, wouldn't he?
Right. No, exactly. And I think to further answer that question is that, you know, these abuses are, of course, like the antithesis of the teachings of Christ, right? To abuse anyone that you have power over. I mean, I don't care if it's the Harvey Weinsteins over adult women or any sort of vulnerable adult for whatever reason that vulnerability exists, or children. It's an exercise of criminal power over someone less powerful than you. And that's just damn wrong.
Yeah. You know, child sex abuse happens in just about every demographic. You know, you have churches, schools, and
It's
everything.
ubiquitous. It's ubiquitous.
Yeah, and the hard nut to crack is you know, the abuse by the mom, the dad, the grandparents, the drunk uncle, the babysitter. You know, because nobody reports that. But I want to ask you for a prediction on the Catholic Church. What do you think this current state of the Catholic Church is, and where do you think it's going?
They need God's help. Right? They need God's help. You I don't know. I mean, maybe it's one of those things that, their numbers will die out as, the older population moves on, and people will wake up to the hypocrisy in front of them, and the lies and the cover up. As an institution, it's extremely tarnished at this point, right? It's tarnished. It's tarnished in the worst way. It's not just like, tax evasion or something, it's like, it's the worst type of tarnishment, right? They've got this brand on them, right? They are branded as pumping out child sexual predators and then covering it up and then covering it up again and then running to bankruptcy or delay and as we all know, moving these priests here and there and everywhere, right? So in terms of their image, it doesn't look very good. And, like I said earlier, Richard, I do think there are good people, even in the worst institutions, whether it be law enforcement, whether it be politics, whether it be the church, there are some good actors. And so maybe this should be an opportunity for them to do the right thing and run with it. I'm not sure that's possible, though.
Yeah, because you can't overrule a pope. So
yeah. And the Pope's not doing anything.
No.
Vatican's not doing a damn thing. They say one thing and they allow their dogs to, fight all this legislation in every single state. They're not doing a damn thing.
Yeah. The relationship between parishioners and the church is one of trust. And I feel that their, trust has been broken to the point where everybody's viscerally offended. And I don't, give you an example. My son, first off, my background is, background is baptism, confirmation,
communion, confirmation,
all that stuff. And I was a Eucharistic minister, 4th degree Knight of Columbus, and I raised my son that way. And my son is now 34 years old, and he was a member of the St. Louis Cathedral Art Society, the youngest one ever. He went on to become a 3rd degree Knight of Columbus. And today, when I talk to my own son, he doesn't want to go anywhere near the church. And I think that's representative of most of our young people. So I think the church needs to stop acting and stop positioning yourself against victims and survivors. You alone are responsible for what's been happening since 390 AD. Maybe it's now the time for a stop. And maybe it's a chance for the church to be reunified, rejuvenated. But I was joking with somebody the other day. I'm like, I think the only way things are going to change is if all the bishops and the Pope have a heart attack at the same time. That's terribly pessimistic. But that's the way I feel. I really believe that.
Well, I think if their numbers continue to drop, that's saying a lot. But I do think youth. I have 5 children, and I think they're more aware. Their eyes are open. And again, I'm going to come back to this: the power of the press, right? The power of the press to educate people, whether we're watching The Keepers or we're watching Spotlight, or it's another sort of documentary, or it's news stories, journalism, whatever it may be. That really will educate people to understand what they're really dealing with. What are we really dealing with when we talk about the Catholic Church, especially around this issue, right?
Yeah. Well, we've come to the end of the hour. Like I said, I know it was a big challenge for you to be here. We rescheduled this like 19 times or something.
No, it was at least like 85 times.
85 times.
Yeah, the COVID really kicked me in the butt. So
well, I'm glad
my apologies.
To be with us. I know the viewers and the listeners are going to thank you for your insights. Is there anything else that you want to say to the audience, or do you want to promote your rock band, or what's going on?
I think really the thing I'd like to say to your audience is, for those who help survivors, thank you. And for those survivors out there, just know you're not alone. Certainly our organization and Child USA is going to continue to fight for you. And you know what? If you can make it to the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia on November 3rd, I believe it is. Yeah, November 3rd. Come celebrate with us. We have some great honorees there. We're going to keep fighting. Join our fight. We'll support you. And thank you for being brave. Thank you for fighting for truth.
Thank you, Kathryn. And by the way, we have a table at the gala.
Great.
So if anybody wants to travel and they want to sit at our table, let us know. Yeah.
Terrific.
Thank you, Kathryn, for your time. And I so appreciate everything that you do.
Sure. Happy to do it.
All right. Thank you, Kathryn.
Thank you.